Welcome back to part 2 of my Pokemon series. In this episode we're looking at option menus and how to navigate between the options. Now in the last episode we actually had our Pokemon set up, so now we can have a choice of which Pokemon we want to use, and we can see how many Pokemon we've got live and fainted. So let's get started with adding some menu options. The main menu option we want to focus on is fighting, but actually when we look at the menus we've got a couple set up already. So first of all, we've got this dialog box, we've got the ability to choose an option, and then we've got our different moves for attacking. So first thing we want to do is be able to click on these 4 buttons here. In standard Pokemon games, you've got a little cursor and you move between these 4. This is more than doable inside of Construct, but it does take a lot of events. So we're going to stick to mouse clicking to save on those events. So if you're using the free version, you only get 25 events or 50 if you sign up. We're not getting close to that 50 number or that 25 number. So we're going to use the mouse instead because it saves quite a few events. So what we're going to do is insert a new object, scroll down, I'm going to add the mouse. While we're here, we might as well add the keyboard because it's something that we'll use for later on. So we'll go down and add that next. Now to click on these buttons, because this is a solid object, we cannot click on the individual buttons. So what we actually have to do is overlay a different sprite on top that we're going to check for. So just create a new object, call it sprite, and we're going to call this option button clicked. And I'm just going to fill this in with red and just hit the X. Now what we're going to do is we're going to line this up to where we want the hitboxes to be for all 4. So I recommend dropping the opacity down to about 30%, and then we just resize this to be how big we want the fight button to be, like so. Just going to copy and paste this another 4 times for the other buttons and try and avoid any overlap if you can. So I'm just going to squeeze this one down a little bit more, and then for the bottom 2 I'm just going to do the same thing. I'll copy and paste and I'll put them below. So get that the way you want it to look. Obviously mine's a little bit rushed, but I want to get this video moving along. So you've got now 4 different button options that you should be able to click on for the 4 different items here. Now what we need to do is distinguish actually the difference between these 4. And the easiest way to do this is we go to our options button clicked. We're just going to add what's called an instance variable. So I'm going to call this option, and I'm going to set the default to 0. Now what we're going to do is for each one, and make sure we've clicked off first, so I'm only clicking on one at the moment, we can go to this option and just change it. So option 1, I'm going to have my bag set to option 2, my Pokemon set to option 3, my run set to option 4. Now some of you are a bit more computer sciencey might think, why are we starting from 1 and not 0? And just simply put, by having 0 as a default value, we never check for 0. It means if we've not changed an option by mistake, it's not going to affect any of our games. So I just like to do that so I know that if I've changed an option, it's definitely changed and we're not getting overlaps with 0 and 0 hitting each other because I've not changed one. So now they're set up, what we can do is we can move to our event sheet. So first thing we're going to actually do is create what's called a function. Now a function is just a block of code that we can call at any time, and the first one's going to be called show dialog. Once we've got that set up, we can copy and paste it, and then we can set up our next function, and this one's going to be called show options. And our final one, we're just going to copy and paste again, and this one's going to be called show attacks. And what we want to do is decide what we want to see for each one. So let's start with our dialog. When the dialog's visible, we actually don't want to see any of this stuff at all. We just want to see the whole dialog box. We also don't want to be able to click on any of these buttons. So let's start with this one first. So we're going to take our moves box and we're going to make sure it's set to invisible. We're going to take our options box and make sure that's also invisible. We're going to take our option buttons clicked, and we're not going to set invisible because we're going to have those completely invisible, and I'll show you how to do that anyway. We don't need to turn those on or off, but what we do need to do is set collisions off, so we can't click on it anymore. And then we just need to make sure our dialog box is also visible so we can see that, and that should be set up for our first one. Now when showing options, I want to do a couple of things. An easiest way is actually just copy and paste what we've got already. We'll just adjust them. So the moves box still needs to be invisible because we're not selecting any moves. The option box, however, does need to be visible. The options button's clicked, so we need to make sure the collisions are back on. And for the dialog box, if we look at the example here, we actually do see a little bit of a text box here, and it will normally say, what do you want Bulbasaur to do? And then we've got the options on the right hand side. So that one still needs to be visible. And then finally, for show attacks, when we're attacking, what do we want to happen? Well, this one's a nice simple one. Everything just needs to be off and disabled, with the exception of the moves box. So we can hit visible for that one. Now, with our show options, one thing I've missed is we do have this what do you want to do sort of option up here. So what we can do is we can actually set the text for that one already. So set text, and we can make sure that text is set to what do you want to do. Now, speaking of text, I've realized that the text is still going to be there. So same again with our dialog text, we're just going to make that invisible when we don't need it. So we just need to go down to our settings, set visible, and we just need to decide when it's going to be visible and invisible. So for dialog, definitely visible. For options, definitely visible. And for attacks, it's going to be invisible. So this obviously takes up quite a bit of our events, but this saves us a lot of time in the long run, because now anytime we want to show our dialog box, we can just run this function and it will do everything that we need to do. Anytime we want to have the options appear, anytime we want to have attacks appear, everything's set up for us. So for the attacks, obviously we do need to add our attacks in a bit later, but that's something we'll look at a bit later. Now let's make it so we can click on these different options. So first thing we want to do is do mouse click. We want to check if object's clicked. And the object we want to click is this options button. Now we also want to distinguish which option button we've clicked on. So we're just going to add another condition. I'm going to say option button clicked, compare instance variable, and we're just going to say if that option is equal to 1. So if it's equal to 1, we want to show attacks. So we can use our functions to do this. So click on functions and click show attacks. And that's all set up. We can now copy and paste this, and we can do our next one. So option 2, and this would be our bag. And for this one, all we're going to do is we're going to show dialog, and then we're going to take our dialog text. We're going to set the text, and we're just going to say opening bag, just so we know that that's what it's doing at the moment. So opening bag. Now, once we've opened the bag, we actually want to go back to the options menu. So we'll set something up for that in just a bit. We'll copy and paste this next one, and we'll just do the same. So option 3, and this one's going to be changing Pokemon. And then finally, the last one's going to be running. So if you choose to run from a battle, which is something we'll implement later when we look at the overworld as well. So last one, running. We're setting up this text so we can see what this code should do further down the line and give us some prompts. Now, if we play this at the moment, we've got these buttons still here, so we need to get rid of those red boxes. But when we hit fight, the fight bit will come up. If we now restart this, and we click any of the options, it says changing Pokemon. So all these different options are coming up. Now what we need to do is we need to actually make it so we can do something after those options are selected. So first thing, I'm going to take my options buttons clicked and just set the invisible off so they're not visible at all during our game. And then what we're going to do is add a brand new event, and this is going to be set to our keyboard. And it's going to be on key pressed. Now the key we want is enter. So if you press enter, nothing's going to happen, and it's one of the 2 special keys inside of construct that don't work. So what we actually need to do is go down to here and hit enter. Then do done. And what we want to do is to do a system action for us. And this is going to be a signal. Now we'll set the signal to be enter. just like so, and make sure if you've done it lowercase, you keep it lowercase for the rest of the tutorial. If you do it uppercase, we'll keep it uppercase for the rest of the tutorial. Now what a signal does is it sends out to other bits of code that's waiting to run, and they're waiting to run into a signals received. So for these ones here, what we're going to do is after we open bag, we're actually going to do nothing until we receive that signal. So wait for signal, and the signal is going to be enter. So we've got that set up, and then as soon as we hit enter, we're just going to do functions. We're just going to do show options. So as soon as we do open and bag, it's going to wait for us to hit enter. Once it hits enter, it will send a signal, and then we show options again. So these two last bits of code can just be copied to the other 4 options. So now when you hit play, it asks, what do we want to do? Fighting is still going to send us to the fighting stage, and we're sort of locked in that stage until we do next week's tutorial where we start looking at basic attacks. But for the other options now, if we click Pokemon, it will say changing Pokemon, and it will stay there until we get the enter. Hit bag, it will say open and bag, and if we hit run, it will say running. There's a really simple options menu that we've got at the moment, and it will just allow us to navigate through those menus. And again, fighting is something we'll implement next week. Running will definitely implement when we deal with the overworld. Swapping Pokemon, bag, maybe not so, but we'll see how we get on. So if you've enjoyed this video so far and you're enjoying this series, please let me know. It tells me that you want to see more of this content. I'll spend more time on this content as well. If not, please like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you in the next video.